A landing of 2,500 U.S. Marines that close to Iranian patrol boats would not be a show of power. It would be a race against geometry, fuel, and nerve. In a doctrine-based reconstruction like this, every mile matters, every radar return matters, and every minute the rescue stays exposed, the cost of getting people out rises fast. Because that number, 2,500, sounds like an invasion until you look at what a real emergency on the Gulf actually demands. You are not just putting boots on sand. You are building, in under an hour, a temporary military ecosystem. Security on the beach, a route inland, air cover overhead, electronic surveillance offshore, casualty treatment, traffic control, refueling, command and control, and a protective funnel to move frightened people from danger to steel decks waiting over the horizon. That is the first thing the title hides. The second is even more dangerous. Iranian patrol boats do not need to sink a ship to threaten the mission. They only need to compress the timeline. To understand why, you have to think like a planner staring at a chart of the northern Gulf. Shallow water, tight sea space, commercial clutter, oil infrastructure, fishing traffic, fast attack craft that can appear as harmless contacts until they do not, distances that look safe on paper and vanish at 40 knots. A patrol boat 12 nautical miles out is not background noise. It is a problem that can arrive in under 20 minutes. Sometimes less of it is already pointed in. And a rescue operation, especially one built around helicopters, landing craft, and confused evacuees, bleeds time at every step. Now add the likely reason Marines are landing in force at all, not for spectacle, for extraction. Maybe a coastal enclave has become untenable. Maybe contractors, diplomats, aid workers, or partner personnel are cut off near a terminal, a district, an airstrip, or an industrial compound too close to the water to ignore and too dangerous to abandon. Helicopters alone can lift people, but they cannot stabilize an entire slice of coastline while the enemy, or simply chaos, closes from multiple directions. A rescue like that needs a perimeter. It needs roads controlled. It needs a landing site kept open. It needs somebody to own the beach until the last civilian is gone. That is where the 2,500 Marines stop sounding excessive and start sounding like the minimum force needed to make the math work. A Marine Expeditionary Unit, reinforced to roughly that strength, is not just infantry. It is a combined package designed for precisely this kind of compressed violence. Rifle companies to secure ground, recon elements to see farther than the beach, combat engineers to clear obstacles, light armor mobility where terrain allows it, air combat elements to scout, strike, and escort, logistics Marines to make the impossible briefly sustainable. What looks massive from a headline is, in operational terms, just enough muscle to open a corridor and hold it while everyone else is trying to collapse it. And that brings us to the first real point of tension. Why land at all if Iranian boats are already closing? Why not keep everybody offshore, launch helicopters, snatch the civilians, and leave? Because rescue by air alone only works when the air picture is permissive, the pickup points are clean, and the numbers are small. Once the people trapped onshore are counted in the hundreds, maybe more, vertical lift becomes only part of the answer. Ospreys can move fast, but they need landing zones, deconflicted approach lanes, escorts, fuel cycles, and time to turn back for another lift. One damaged landing zone, or one militia truck parked in the wrong alley, can slow the whole sequence. A beachhead gives the operation depth. It turns a thin thread into a corridor. In a scenario like this, the landing would begin before sunrise, not because darkness hides everything, but because low light buys uncertainty. Amphibious ships remain over the horizon, far enough out to complicate targeting, close enough to launch waves. The first movements are never the dramatic ones people imagine. They are deliberate. Sensors go up before people do. Drones push out. Electronic support measures start listening. Helicopter crews study wind, sea state, and thermal clutter. Surface search radars sort fishing dhows, merchant traffic, and military contacts. Somewhere in a command space lit mostly by screens, a watch officer is already tracking the one thing nobody wants to say too early. Small, fast contacts forming into a pattern rather than a coincidence. Then the assault support package moves. MV-22s and heavy-lift helicopters push toward landing zones inland or near the shoreline. At the same time, landing craft and armored connectors begin bringing in the force that helicopters cannot sustain by themselves. Depending on the exact package, that could mean LCAC skimming in fast with vehicles and supplies, or conventional craft moving heavier loads more deliberately. The point is not elegance. The point is to build combat power ashore fast enough that the first Marines do not arrive alone and stay alone. This is where the water becomes a weapon. Iranian naval doctrine in the Gulf has long leaned on asymmetry. Small hulls, high speed, short decision windows, swarm tactics, ambiguity right up to the last possible second. A fast patrol boat with rockets, machine guns, anti-armor weapons, or even just the possibility of explosives changes how a commander has to think. Not because the boat is bigger than an American destroyer, because it is smaller. Smaller means harder to read, harder to sort from civilian clutter, easier to multiply, and politically dangerous to shoot first if the track is still ambiguous. In rescue operations, ambiguity is expensive, so the Marines hit the shore under a problem that is still unresolved. The patrol boats are closing, but not yet firing. That matters. It means this is no longer just a tactical scene. It is a rules of engagement trap. Fire too early, and a rescue becomes the opening exchange of a broader fight. Wait too long, and your landing force may be caught in the most vulnerable phase of the operation, still unloading, still orienting, still stitching together its defensive geometry from surf line to street corner. And the geometry matters more than rhetoric. The beach is not a line in the sand. It is a funnel. Men, radios, ammunition, vehicles, casualties, evacuees, interpreters, medics, litter teams, security elements, air controllers, all of it moving through a compressed strip where the sea is behind you and dangers inland and offshore at the same time. The first task is not to advance heroically. It is to widen that funnel before it chokes. Marines push out to dominate key intersections, rooftops, berms, fuel points, and potential observation posts. Engineers mark lanes. Air controllers deconflict aircraft stacks overhead. Someone establishes a casualty collection point. Someone else starts sorting the first evacuees, separating panic from urgency, urgency from medical crisis, and medical crisis from those who can still walk. This is the midpoint of the operation, and it pays off the first question hidden in the title. Why 2,500? Because a rescue under threat is not a single act. It is a chain of simultaneous tasks that all fail together if any one of them fails first. Security without transport means civilians stay trapped. Transport without a perimeter means aircraft or landing craft arrive at a killing zone. Medics without route control get buried. Air cover without positive identification risks hitting the wrong thing. 2,500 Marines is not excess. It is the size of the machine required to keep all those links from snapping at once. But the larger tension has not been paid off yet. The Iranian patrol boats are still there, and now they are closer. That is where the scene starts to shift from rescue into exchange math. On one side, expensive platforms, amphibious ships, destroyers, tiltrotors, helicopters, landing craft, aircraft whose value runs into billions and whose political cost is even higher. On the other, boats that are cheap, agile, and dangerous precisely because losing one may be acceptable to the side using it. That asymmetry does not just threaten ships. It threatens tempo. It can force escorts to reposition, aircraft to divert, and commanders to pull protective layers tighter around the sea base when they most need to keep the rescue lane open. This is also where the obvious threat can become the wrong one, because in a serious literal confrontation, the visible boats may be only the front edge. The deeper risk is that the boats are pulling attention while something else tightens a noose. Drones launch from shore, a shore-based missile battery waking up on a nearby coast, electronic jamming aimed at navigation and data links, or armed proxies moving toward the extraction point inland. In other words, the patrol boats might not be the attack. They might be the timer. A disciplined commander has to solve that without losing the mission. That means layers. Attack helicopters move into positions where they can visibly cover likely approach vectors without being forced into a premature strike. Fighters overhead extend the sensor picture and watch for emissions that do not fit the surface scene. Destroyers and escorts sharpen their fire control posture without crossing political lines before they have to. The landing force ashore accelerates instead of freezing. That is the hard part. When danger builds offshore, instinct says pause and consolidate. But a rescue only survives if it keeps moving. So the beachhead expands while the water grows more unstable. Convoys move inland to pull out the people this operation was actually launched to save. Those convoys are not glamorous. They are nerve-wrapped in discipline. Buses, trucks, armored escorts, route clearance, dismounts watching overpasses, crews scanning windows and culverts. Every delay inland feeds risk offshore. Because the longer those civilians stay on the ground, the longer the amphibious force has to sit inside an increasingly hostile envelope. The title says the rescue beats the clock, and in a realistic reconstruction, this is how, not with one explosive moment, but with compression. The Marines reduce decision time for the enemy by moving faster than the enemy can comfortably calibrate. Evacuees are brought in waves, triaged, documented if possible, pushed onto aircraft and connectors in disciplined order. Non-essential kit gets abandoned. Comfort gets abandoned first, then neatness, then every idea of a perfect extraction. The mission stops trying to look clean and starts trying to be complete. At sea, the Iranian boats keep pressing the edge, not necessarily suicidal, not necessarily reckless, intentional. They probe ranges, headings, reactions. They test whether American escorts will warn, shadow, maneuver, illuminate, or shoot. That behavior matters because it reveals the real contest. The boats do not need to win a naval battle. They need to inject enough uncertainty that Washington, the fleet commander, and the Marine commander all feel the rescue becoming a strategic liability. If they can make the operation look like it might spill into a wider clash, they gain leverage without ever firing first. This is where technology and posture begin doing the work that headlines later assign to toughness. A destroyer's radar lock, an attack helicopter's angle of approach, a fighter's unseen presence overhead, a warning burst in front of a bow instead of into a hull, a patrol craft suddenly realizing it is being watched from multiple domains at once. Literal crises are full of moments where escalation is stopped not by kindness, but by clarity, by making the other side understand in one sharp instant that the next step would end badly and immediately. Somewhere in that sequence, one of the loops opens and closes almost at the same time. Why were the boats really closing? Not only to threaten the Marines, to measure the threshold, to find out how much room America believed it had while conducting a rescue under pressure. That is intelligence collection disguised as brinkmanship. And if the Americans respond with discipline while still completing the extraction, the answer becomes visible. Enough room to finish the mission, but not enough margin to be careless. By now the beach is a machine running hot. Final evacuees come through dusty, shaken, overloaded with whatever they could carry until they were told to drop half of it and keep moving. Marines rotate security sectors. Medics move faster than fatigue. Aircraft crews cut turn times. Surface connectors take heavier loads. The first waves begin pulling back what was inserted earliest. Some positions ashore are collapsed in stages. Not because the threat is gone, but because the mission is finally outrunning the danger that defined it, and that, more than any cinematic exchange of fire, is the turning point. The rescue wins when the center of gravity shifts from exposure to withdrawal. Once a majority of civilians are offshore and the landing force is no longer reinforcing the beach but compressing it, the patrol boats lose their best chance to turn uncertainty into leverage. The Marines are still vulnerable. The escorts are still tense. The aircraft are still burning fuel and time. But the mission is no longer balanced on the presence of frightened people trapped on land. The hostage, in a strategic sense, has been removed from the equation. If the boats peel away at that stage, it will not mean the risk was imaginary. It will mean the signaling phase did what both sides needed it to do. The rescue got done. The red lines held. Nobody had to explain why a humanitarian extraction became a regional naval battle before noon. But that outcome should not comfort anyone too much, because it exposes the deeper problem this kind of incident represents. A rescue this large, this close to hostile littorals, is no longer just a humanitarian action. It is a test of whether the United States can still move people through a threatened coastal battle space without first dominating every layer of that battle space. And increasingly, The answer depends on speed, integration, and ambiguity management more than raw firepower alone. Cheap drones, fast boats, mines, coastal missiles, electronic interference, and social media-driven political pressure all work together now. They do not need to sink an amphibious ship. They only need to make saving lives look too escalatory to attempt. That is the doctrine shift hiding underneath the title. 20 years ago, many rescue operations were framed as permissive or semi-permissive events with isolated pockets of danger in the Gulf and in other crowded littorals. That assumption is dying. The rescue package is to arrive already prepared for deterrence, electronic contest, maritime harassment, and rapid escalation. Not because it wants to fight, but because it cannot count on a clean emergency anymore. Rescue and combat are no longer separate categories. They are adjacent states, divided by minutes and miscalculation. So if 2,500 U.S. Marines land while Iranian patrol boats close in, the real story is not whether the boats fire. It is whether the Americans can build enough order, fast enough, to keep the entire crisis from tipping into a battle neither side may actually want in that moment. The rescued civilians will see helicopters, dust, shouted instructions, and the open deck of safety. The commanders will see timelines, arcs, sectors, and thresholds. Historians, if they ever reconstruct in full, will probably see something colder, a modern rescue operation balanced on the edge of anti-access warfare. And the warning at the end is simple. The next time a force like this has to go in, the patrol boats may only be the part you can see. The more dangerous layer may already be waiting beyond the horizon, under the water, above the coast, or inside the network. If a rescue barely beats the clock today, the next clock may start earlier, run faster, and close before the first ramp ever drops.